Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Happy Tuesday, happy holidays. This is our Tuesday podcast for Real Estate Tidbits. I hope everyone had a great Memorial Day and thanked any veteran that you knew for their service. Obviously, that's a day to honor and celebrate our veterans. The nice thing is we got a little rain yesterday, which even though rain can be an inconvenience, we needed the moisture in Orlando, so that was a good thing. So today we're back to our normal, very warm weather. So I wanted to kind of go over a few things that kind of tie into the last podcast, but are a little bit of a variation. For those of you that listened to Friday's podcast, we went over the clear cooperation policy and some of the ramifications of that, with how some of the bigger companies are wanting that to be addressed, along with what the NAR's rules are. So I won't belabor the point by going over it again, but we'll kind of start off with that broadcast. So today I wanted to kind of go over more of the basics and adjustments that a good agent needs to make. For those of you that follow the market closely, we've had several cycles within a reasonably short period of time. Just to kind of go through a timeline of the last 15 years, basically. For about 12 years of that, from around 2011 to the middle of 2023, so that's about 12 and a half years, we had different forms of a seller's market, meaning that prices were continuing to rise, and so the sellers were in a more favorable position relative to buyers. The reasons for that were a couple. Number one, we had bottomed out so much during the real estate major downturn in the late 2000s that we had nowhere to go but up. So we slowly started increasing right as Obama was getting ready to serve his second term. Some of the changes that he put in when he took over in 2009, due to the sensitive nature of our economy and how our banking and real estate system almost completely crashed under the previous administration, he made some changes into the regulatory process to tighten up lending, to make lenders do what they should have always been doing, and that is to approve loans for qualified folks. At the same time, around 2011 and 12, we had pretty much eradicated all the crap that was going on, meaning that we had a ton of short sales, a ton of foreclosures. So we had a lot of distressed properties that obviously were selling at lower prices and bringing the cost of real estate significantly lower. So we finally cleared all those out. So that was one reason why prices had nowhere to go but up, which they started doing in 2012. Secondly, as we cleared out all this junky inventory of distressed properties, we actually had below average inventory levels, some years worse than others. But we've had for a number of years now really a below average amount of homes for sale, especially in the areas that people like to live in. I personally can sell everywhere, but I tend to focus more on the south part of Orlando, southwest Orlando, which is Hunters Creek, Dr. Phillips, Windermere, and southeast Orlando, which is Conway, Lake Nona area. Those are all popular areas, and so they're good barometers of supply and demand. So that has taken place over that time frame. Now, to jump forward a few years, we're in the pandemic in the spring of 2020. Everybody was shuttered for a few months, and nobody really knew what was going to happen because there was confusion. At that time, President Trump was not really divulging the extent of the problem or really underestimated it. So people were nervous. Obviously, unfortunately, we had a lot of people pass away during COVID. And until we had the vaccine come out in late 2020, early 2021, we really had to do unconventional things to try to protect ourselves with wearing masks. People were staying indoors for a while, things of that nature. So what happened in the marketplace in Central Florida was we had about an 8 or a 10-week period in the early spring of 2020 where people were just not really doing anything real estate-wise. But then everyone realized we couldn't be shuttered indefinitely. So then we started having pent-up demand because all these people in that period that maybe would have been looking in or buying real estate hit the market along with people that were going to take advantage of our typical busy spring-summer season. So what happened in the latter half of 2020 and what continued from a momentum standpoint for 2.5 years were that we continued to have way more buyers than sellers, and we had this price momentum. So the prices, especially in 2021 and 22, went dramatically up. One of the years they went up over 20%, and one of the years they went up over 15%. And that continued for about the first half of 2023. So if you happen to be a customer that was fortunate enough to buy a home in 2018, 19, or the first half of 2020, and for whatever reasons you were ready to sell your home, you were going to make a very significant profit, one that probably won't be duplicated for a number of years now for such a short period of time. As we got into the latter part of 2023 and continued last year in 2024, the prices flattened out. They didn't go down, fortunately, but they flattened out. And that was due in large measure because the inventory still stayed relatively low in 2024. However, we've seen some significant changes in the first 5 months of 2025. Inventory, especially in the more popular areas, has started to increase enough where it's noticeably more than it was last year. So if you take into account increased inventory and you have continued high interest rates, again, if you go back to 2020 and 21 and those timeframes, interest rates were still ranging between 2.75% and maybe 3.5%. Now, over the past year, they've been anywhere from 6.5% to about 7.5%. So that's like double the rate. So if you combine more inventory, higher interest rates by a significant amount, and the third variable, which nobody anticipated, was we have a new administration in 2025 that has basically wanted to take a chainsaw to a lot of the ways that our country has functioned for the last 100 years. And a lot of people are nervous about that because these changes, things change and people need to adjust to change. But typically the most effective change is a reasoned analytical transition to get everybody accustomed to the change and be prepared for it. With Doge and Elon Musk and some of the other extreme, what they call visionaries in our current economic and political climate, these changes have been rapid and people are nervous about them. Businesses don't really know what they should order. Should they expand or contract? We've got these tariffs that are in effect one day, the next day they're not in effect, then they're back in effect. The amount of the tariff changes. It's complete instability. So a lot of people have made a conscious decision to hold off purchasing. So you've got people holding off purchasing, you've got higher interest rates, and you've got more inventory. So what is that a recipe for? Well, if you correlate that to making a cake, that's a recipe for buyers all of a sudden being in a much better position than they were the previous 12 to 15 years, and sellers being in a significantly more sensitive position right now. So what does that mean? And I'm going to address the rest of this podcast to sellers. What does that mean for a seller? Well, obviously, sellers sell for different reasons. Some sell for profit. Some sell because they're downsizing. Some sell because their family size has gotten larger. Some sell because they're doing better professionally and they want either a newer home, a larger home, a more preferred neighborhood. There's different reasons why people sell. So some people, maybe it's a job transfer. So there's a percentage of people that have to sell for different reasons, and there's a percentage of people that electively decide to sell. They don't have to sell, but life has put them in a position where they prefer selling. So what does that mean if you're a seller? Well, I can tell you a few things that it means, and a lot of people still haven't adjusted to it yet. Number one, it means you have to have your house in top condition when you put it on the market, meaning that you need to critically look at the house along with whoever your broker or realtor of record is going to be and say, what do I need to change in this house that's not going to cost me an arm and a leg? For example, do I have old worn carpet? Does the house need painting? Does the landscaping need sprucing up? Do I have odors in the house, either because I cook spicy foods, maybe I have pets that have created that? There's different variables for that you as the seller have control over. And none of the solutions for the things that I mentioned are astronomical from a cost standpoint. So those things need to be addressed. I'm not so much saying you should do a redo of your house, because not everybody is either going to want or afford to update their kitchen with new cabinetry, new flooring, new countertops. That's probably not realistic when you're getting ready to put a house on the market. But the things that you can eliminate to make a much better first impression are very important. And one of the underlooked things is your landscaping. I know we've had a lot of dry weather this year, and so there's a lot of lawns that are looking really rough. They either didn't get enough water fed to them, maybe they have some of the Florida diseases like chinch bugs, mole crickets, so their lawns are dry looking, they're barren, and they're not a very good way to first introduce your home to the market. And because the first thing that people are going to see when they pull up is, what does your lawn look like? What does your landscaping look like? And is the front of the house, is the paint and front door in good shape? Things of that nature. Because if those things are lacking, it detracts completely from the showing. And so a lot of times, if those things are lacking, that first minute of viewing by the buyer has put such a negative perception in their minds that they're going to overlook a lot of the better features that your house has. Along with that, how can you effectively stage the house? It's important that you remove clutter, minimize furniture, try to strategically present your home, and this is where the realtor comes into play in giving you some information and recommendations about the best ways to do that. And last but not least, and probably as always, the most important thing when you're putting a house on the market is pricing. A lot of people are still pricing their homes like it was 2023 or 22. And that type of philosophy, unless you have a superior house, is not going to be effective, or if you have a more modest priced house. We're finding that homes in the modest price ranges are not quite as rigid because there's a lot fewer of them, so you can get away being a little bit more aggressive with your pricing. But if you're in the mid to upper price ranges, you've got to take pricing extremely into account. And so when your realtor and yourself go through a comparable market assessment, what upgrades do you have compared to these other homes that were on the market? How many homes are on the market in your area? What's the relationship of homes for sale to homes that have sold? What is the pricing in that particular neighborhood? Because when I say pricing, you have to look specifically at your neighborhood. And some of these bigger neighborhoods, you have to look at a more similar pocket of that neighborhood. So it's really important that you price the home to start with critically and properly. A lot of people will say, well, I can always lower my price. And that's correct. However, lowering the price is not the optimal solution, because maybe during that first few weeks of hitting the market, people just didn't look at your house because they felt there was better values out there. And so why look at your house when they can look at something that's more affordably priced and it'll be easier to negotiate? So these are variables that everybody needs to consider, and they're crucial. I try to be optimistic and realistic at the same time. The optimistic is that I feel if my sellers follow my recommendations, we're going to be successful in selling the home. My realistic is that the market for 2025 is going to be challenging in most areas of the United States. And the South is one of the areas that's probably been more impacted because we had larger price increases. People can tell you different things, but when you look at the economic barometers and all the uncertainty that we're facing and the anticipation that interest rates are not going to change significantly, we're going to continue to have more sellers than buyers. So waiting a few months is not going to be a solution for most people. And we're in the midst of our quote unquote normal busy season. And I can tell you from experience, as I've had a lot of busy seasons, this is one of the quieter ones relative to the last 15 years. So think long and hard about that. I highly recommend, if you're even contemplating putting your house on the market or even buying a house, you get with a skilled agent that can give you an analysis of not only what your budget will afford, but more importantly, what your budget will afford in a particular area that you might want to be in. Shifting gears a little bit, and these two things will be on the quicker side. Let me give you an update on the NBA basketball playoffs, because you know I always bring that up. Right now we're in the conference finals. In the Eastern Conference, Indiana's ahead of the New York Knicks 2-1. The Knicks came back from a 20-point deficit in Game 3 when it looked like the series was pretty much over. Tonight's Game 4. If the Knicks win this game, it's going to go down to the wire in this series. If Indiana holds home court tonight, I believe that they're pretty much assured of winning. In the Western Conference, the Oklahoma Thunder won a close game last night, and they're ahead of the Minnesota Timberwolves 3-1. And I anticipate the Thunder closing them out in Game 5. As I mentioned during one of my earlier podcasts, I continue to think, and I said this before the series started, that it'll be Minnesota against Oklahoma City against Indiana in the finals. I think it'll be a highly entertaining series, and I do think Oklahoma City will win. Last but not least, and I'm going to take a little bit of poetic license here and compare something in politics to real estate. For those of you that know, you've heard me make general comments about our political system from time to time. And before the current administration appointed all their cabinet members, I commented on a few of the people that were, in my opinion, totally unqualified and threats to our sovereignty. Well, the worst of the people was Pete Hegseth, and he's continued to live up to a reputation of being totally unqualified and incompetent and basically affecting national security. He and Mike Wentz, who already resigned, were using Signal as one of the texting mechanisms to communicate when they were going to bomb different points overseas. And then he compounded that, Hegseth, by texting his family over the same texts about strategic things that the United States military was doing. Talk about a knucklehead move, putting our soldiers possibly at risk. This guy never should have been appointed, number one. Number two, he should be fired immediately. And number three, the party in charge, which at this point is the Republicans, should be coming out in unison against this guy. Unfortunately, in our political system, sometimes the person in charge, which in this case is President Trump, doesn't want to admit he made a gross error. And because there's so much criticism to Hegseth, he's almost gotten his back up in trying to justify this gentleman's behavior. It's a total embarrassment. And the reason I say I'm going to transition to real estate with this is think about all the scrutiny that real estate brokers and agents are under. We had all these legal changes over the summer about additional things that realtors can and couldn't do. If they didn't do certain things, they could get sued, they could lose their license, whatever the case may be. And relatively speaking, the things that realtors were accused of, which was a minority of realtors, number one, were pretty minor things. For example, one of the things that you would lose your license on, understandably, is if you were working with a buyer and a seller, so you were called a transaction broker, which in and of itself has some inherent conflicts, but a lot of people operate that way. And let's say you told either side or both sides about what the other one was willing to accept. Well, that's a good way for the realtor to lose his license, or at the very least get sued, for doing things that are against the fiduciary duty of his customer. Then we correlate to our Secretary of Defense, who's in charge of the whole military and the security of our sovereignty in our country. And he is going online and texting secrets of the military, and yet nothing's happened to this guy. If a realtor did 10% of that, they'd be out on their butts and maybe not get their license back. But this guy's still in office. I think people need to wake up. We need to completely revamp our political system. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. Our system is broken. We need to come out with a viable alternative to both parties, because they're both, in my opinion, not serving the majority of the American public. That's all for today. I'm sorry to have preached a little bit, but I think these things are important for people to think about. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll see you on Friday. This is Marty Kaiser out.